Amen. Amen. Hey, that marriage conference he mentioned, it's the topic is communication in marriage, and so that I'm mainly just doing it for me and Ashley, so everybody else can kind of show up if they need to as well. But we would love to have you be there. And so, like Mark said, my name's Bryan. I am one of the pastors here at Doxology. So excited you're here with us this morning. Now, before this was my job, before I was a pastor here at this church, my other job is I used to work for a college ministry. Okay, and we had probably about 70 staff that worked for me, and almost all of them were between the ages of 22 and 26. Okay, that's where all of our staff are kind of in that age range. And so as the 39-year-old, not now, but then, the 39-year-old, boss that I was at the time, I was the old guy, okay? I was the old guy in this organization that I worked for, and there were a lot of things like as the old guy, you had to do, and you had to take every opportunity that you could to prove that you're not as old as they think you are. And so I remember one time at a staff event that we had, we were playing kickball. Okay, we had this big kickball tournament, and I was like, this is it. Okay, this is the moment, as the 39-year-old old guy, here's a moment where I'm going to be able to show all of these 22 to 26-year-olds that I still got it. Okay, there's some things there that I needed to prove. I had an opportunity to prove that I still had, my athletic prowess a little bit along the lines. I could prove to them that I wasn't washed up. I could prove to all of these 22-year-olds that I could still win. So we get on this kickball team, and I am very confident, okay? I'm very confident in my ability to win in this kickball tournament. It turns out the other people on my team weren't as confident in my abilities as I was. And so they ended up putting me in right field, okay, which is not the position to where you put your star players in a kickball tournament. And so, but I'm just there. We're going through every game, and I'm just kind of there biding my time in right field, just kind of throwing a pity party. It's like, man, if they would just trust me, I could win this game for them. So we're there, and I'm sitting in right field, and as luck would have it, we're in the final game, okay? It's the final inning of the final game of this kickball tournament. I'm just kind of sitting out there in right field, and all of a sudden, somebody kicks the ball in my direction. So this ball is coming at me. It's a close game. It's tied. I'm like, man, if I can catch this ball in the air, we're going to win. Like we're going to at least prevent them from winning. We're going to give ourselves a chance to win. And so, but if I drop, the winning run's going to cross the plate. And so I'm running after this ball, and it looks like it's getting ready just to drop right in front of me. But before the ball drops, I kind of have this argument with myself in my mind. And I finally Bryan, you got to go for it. Okay, you got to go for it. Okay, this is your chance. You got to put it all on the line. And so I dive to try to catch this ball. And this is what I got in return. Ball goes through my hands, hits me in the face, and then my face just smashes right in the ground. Just another painful reminder for me at the end as I was getting ready to turn 40, a painful reminder to me that winning isn't always worth it. Okay, sometimes winning, we can go to the next slide. Let's just make sense. So, sometimes winning, it's just not worth it. It's just not always worth it. I've been married to my wife, Ashley, for 18 years this October. 18 years of marriage, okay? And I'm sure we're the only ones. But in those 18 years of being married to each other, every now and then, we have some disagreements. Okay, we have some disagreements when we live together and we just do life together. And one of the things that I've learned over these 18 years is that even if I'm right, okay, even if I win, I can still lose, okay? I can still lose. And I've learned the lesson that sometimes winning, it isn't always worth it. Have you learned that? Have there been times in your life to where you've learned that winning, it's not worth it? That even if you win, whether it's in a conflict with another person or some things that you do to try to get ahead in life because of what it costs you to get there, winning sometimes isn't always worth it. Have you had moments in your life to where you've gotten what you want, but on the back end you realize this isn't actually what I wanted? Times to where I've won, but because of, in conflicts or things that I've done to get ahead, the price that I paid to get there, it really, when you look back on it, it would have been better for me and for everyone involved if I would have just lost. Sometimes winning, it just isn't worth it. Winning isn't always worth it. So how do we know? Okay, how do we know when those moments are? How do we know before we get in there that these types of situations, because of what it's going to cost me, winning in this situation, it's probably not going to be worth it. The cost is probably going to be too high. How do we know when winning isn't going to be worth it? We're going to answer that question this morning as we continue our study through the life of Abraham. If you guys have your Bibles, you can open them up to Genesis chapter 13. Okay, Genesis chapter 13. And this morning, as we find Abraham, we're going to find him right in the middle of one of these exact situations. Okay, a moment where Abraham, he has the opportunity to win. Okay, but as he looks at this situation and what it's going to cost him, he's going to decide that winning in this situation, it just isn't worth it. Okay, it isn't worth what it's going to cost him. And through his example, we're going to see what are the situations that we can kind of know as we enter into that if we do whatever it is, if we have a win at all costs attitude in these situations, it's probably not going to be worth the cost that we're going to have to pay. How do we know when winning isn't going to be worth it? We left Abraham last week. He was coming straight off a pretty big failure, okay, in Egypt. A pretty big failure in Egypt. Now he's come back to the land that God has promised him. And as he gets to this land, he's going to find even a different kind of problem is going to be there waiting for him. So Genesis chapter 13, beginning in verse 5, it says, now Lot, okay, Lot is Abraham's nephew. Now Lot, who was moving about Abram. So Lot, he's been traveling with Abram through all of these different situations. He also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And what happened? Because of all of their possessions and the land where they were staying, it says, and quarreling arose. Okay, and quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at the time. And so Abram and his nephew Lot, they come back from Egypt and they have got a lot of wealth, okay, on the way. This has kind of made them rich. They have so much money, so much wealth that the land to where they are living at this time, it can't support them. Okay, there's too much, they have too many possessions, and the land can't support both of them at the same time. I mean, no money, no problems. Okay, this is kind of where they're at this time. And it says because of this conflict that they had, it says that quarreling arose. Quarreling arose. It says conflict. Conflict, it happened and it came. And isn't that crazy how that happens? Conflict, it just kind of, that's a great way to put it. You know, quarreling arose. Sometimes conflict, it just happens in our life. Last Sunday, I was just after church. Typically, I go home and I just crash for a little bit. So I'll go home and I'll just take a nap. So last Sunday afternoon, I'm just laying in my bed. I'm taking a nap when all of a sudden I hear my daughter screaming at the top of her lungs. Okay, I get up. I'm trying to figure out what goes on. My wife opens the door, and my daughter, she is chasing my son with the intensity of a lioness after her prey. Okay, I mean, he did something to set her off, and I'm just sitting here, you know, all of a sudden just by myself, and quarreling arose. Okay, I mean, it just kind of happens. Conflict, it happens. Okay, conflict is going to happen in our life. We're going to face it. We can't avoid it. Okay, conflict is something that we have to deal with. But in those moments, whenever conflict comes in our life, just because it happens, it doesn't mean that we always have to win. Okay, when conflict arises, it doesn't mean that we always have to win. And through Abraham's example right here, we're going to see some situations to where when conflict arises, when that quarreling comes, situations to where winning isn't going to be worth it. So let's see what those are. First, we're going to see, if you're taking notes, winning, it isn't worth it if it's going to cost us our relationships. Okay, winning isn't worth it if it's going to cost us our relationships. Let's see how Abraham responded to this conflict. Verse 8, it says, so Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine. He's like, hey, this isn't, we shouldn't be doing this. Why? For we are close relatives. He says, we've got history together. Okay, we've lived life together. You're family. Okay, let's not have quarreling between us because we are close relatives. It's not the whole land before you. Let's part company before we go too far. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. But because we are close, because we are family, because of our relationship, Abram in this moment, he says, winning, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it if it's going to cost us our relationship. Do you guys remember those ice trays? Like the old ice trays where you like had to put water in and actually put it into the freezer? You guys remember those? Okay, if you don't remember those, you're making me really sad and feel really old. And so, so when Ashley and I, when we first got married, I remember our first apartment that we ever lived in, it was like $300 a month. Okay, it was amazing. But our $300 a month apartment did not have a refrigerator that had an ice maker. Okay, so we had to put the ice trays, like the old ice trays, into the freezer. And so at that time, our first year of marriage, I was notorious, okay, for taking these ice trays. I take them out of the freezer. I would put ice back, from the ice trays into my cup, and I would take the empty ice trays, and I would just put them back in the freezer. Didn't put water in, didn't fill them up, and it drove Ashley crazy. Okay, absolutely crazy, but she was gracious toward me. She would continually remind me again and again, Bryan, hey, after you empty the ice trays, why don't you just put the water in them, put it back in the freezer so we'll have ice later on down the road? And she told me that again and again and again, and I wanted to. I mean, I really did. I wanted to do it. I wasn't like intentionally trying to like just stick it to my wife. I mean, I wanted to do it. I just couldn't remember. I just couldn't get in my mind. I couldn't remember, and I kept putting these empty ice trays back into our freezer over and over and over again. And for months, Ashley, she just reminded me over and over and over again. Finally, until one day, she just had enough. Okay, she was done with it. She was done with this ice tray conflict that we had. But you know what she did? She decided, hey, I'm going to be the ice tray filler-upper for our family. She just took it on herself. She goes, when I'm done with this, I'm not going to talk to Bryan about it anymore. I'm not going to remind him anymore. She says, if it's going to cost us our relationship for something as small as ice trays, I'm just going to forget about it. I'm going to let it go, and I'm just going to do it myself. Some of you died a little inside when you just heard that happened. I mean, it's hard to do. It's hard to let go. But for the sake, it's probably why we're still married, is because of her. For the sake of our relationship. She said this winning in this situation, it's just not worth it. For winning is something as small as ice trays. If it's going to cost us our relationship, it's just not worth it. And we all know people, don't we? We've either experienced it in our own life, or we all know people who used to be close, family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers, who for whatever reason, whether it's just our own pride or an unwillingness to ask for forgiveness or to give forgiveness to another person or valuing, things over people. We all know people who used to be close and they haven't talked to each other in years. And Abraham says, if this conflict we're in right now, if this is going to cost us our relationship, it's not worth it. And I know every situation's not the same, and what I'm not saying is you let people walk over you to the point where you put yourself at risk or other people at risk or danger. But for most situations in our life, if winning, if it is going to cost you somebody who is close to you, more often than not, that's just too high of a price to pay. Winning, it's not always worth it. If it's going to cost us our relationships, it's not worth it. So for the sake of their relationship, Abraham, he acts graciously toward Lot. So how did Lot respond? Verse 10, it says, Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. So Abraham, he graciously, he gives this choice to Lot. Okay, and this was an incredibly generous act by Abraham. Abraham, he held all of the cards in this situation, okay? He was the older one. He was the one who God had promised this land to. And he says it's not worth it if it's going to cost us our relationship. And he gives this choice to Lot. And Lot, he looks around, and what does he see? He sees well-watered land. Okay, what he looks and sees, what his eyes see, he sees a way to protect and to preserve what it is that he values most. Okay, in his situation, it's his possessions, it's his herds, it's his flocks. And we see in this moment of conflict what really he values rises to the top. We're going to see later, it actually prevents him from seeing something that he should have seen. But his eyes saw what his heart loved. Okay, his eyes saw what his heart loved. And that happens to us. And these moments of conflict, it are what we truly value. It kind of comes to the surface. Our eyes see what our heart loves. It's like me and the Cowboys, okay? I mean, it happens every single year. 2 weeks ago, we beat the Giants 40-0, and I send a text to a group of friends of mine who are also Cowboy fans, and I just say, hey, guys, this is it. We're winning the Super Bowl. Friend of my text group, he responds with some screenshots of just messages that I have sent to them over the past 4 years. I'm going to have him up here. I think we got him up here. Yeah, he just sends this to me. Guys, I think we're going to win the Super Bowl. We got another one. Guys, I think we're going to win the Super Bowl. Here we go again. Cowboys are winning the Super Bowl 2018. We're winning the Super Bowl. And so every year, I see it. I just see it, man. I became a Cowboys fan I was in middle school when the Aikman, Irvin, Emmett days, and man, they just grabbed my heart. Okay, and my eyes see what my heart loves, and they do it to me every single year because I love them. I love them, and our eyes do that. Our eyes, they start to see what our heart loves, and we see that here with Lot, given the option. He's like, hey, you can go wherever you want. You can take whatever you want. And he looks out, and what does he see? What he sees is a way to protect and to preserve what he loves. Okay, and it kind of rises up to the top there. And so Lot, he saw what his heart loved. And so he was so focused on that. He was so focused on protecting it and preserving what it was that he loved. In his situation, his possessions. It kind of rose to the top. That's where he wanted to win. He was so focused on that he missed something that he should have seen instead. Okay, and it's going to cost him. So if you're taking notes here, if winning is going to cost us our relationships, that cost is too high. And winning, it's also not worth it if it's going to cost us our righteousness. Okay, if it's going to cost us our righteousness. Let's continue with verse 10. It says, so Lot, he's looked out, he saw this land, and it says just kind of a parenthetical statement right here. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Some of you, you'll recognize that. Some of you, it was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Pitch his tents near Sodom. Well, what's the big deal with Sodom? Why is it risky to put yourself there? Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. When given the option, okay, this moment of conflict, and we see what Lot truly values, and given the option to go wherever he wants to go, he looks, and what he sees is a way to preserve what he loves the most. But what he should have seen was Sodom. What he should have seen is he was putting himself in this situation to where his ability to walk with God, his ability to live a righteous life that honors and pleases God, he was putting it at risk. And he never even saw it. He was blinded to the dangers of Sodom. Well, how did he get to that point? And what happened to Lot to where he got to that point? Think of this. If we were, let's say we were to take this congregation right now, okay, and we were transplant ourselves on the surface of the moon. Okay, that'd be pretty cool, okay, to have church on the moon if we could do that this morning. It'd be cool for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons that it would be cool for me is when you are on the moon, you can jump 6 times higher on the moon than you can on the earth, okay? If I could have done that, we would have won that kickball game, okay? I would have made the catch. And so, but we can jump 6 times higher on the moon than we can on the earth. We know that it's because of the pull of gravity. But why? Why is gravity less on the moon than it is here on earth? Anybody know? 5th grade science, I'm learning it. The moon is smaller. Okay, the moon, it's smaller than the earth. And because the moon is smaller, the pull of gravity there is smaller than it is on here. The smaller that the world is, the smaller that the pull of gravity is. If we were somehow to go to the surface of the sun, okay, if we could go there and we wouldn't, disintegrate as soon as we got there, if we were to lay down, we would never be able to get back up. Okay, because the sun is so much bigger than the earth and the pull that it has is so much greater. And kind of the principle is the bigger the world is, the greater the pull that it has. The bigger the world is, the greater the pull that it has. And the greater that the world is to you, the greater the pull is that it's going to have on your life. And that's what happened to Lot here. And given this moment to where He's given the choice, and you see his values come to the top. Where do you want to win? The world had become so big to him, and what he valued there became so important to him. And in his case, protecting what he had. The pull was so great, it blinded him to the dangers that were right there, to Sodom. And it's going to cost him. It's going to cost him dearly. By the end of Lot's story, we're not going to look at it, but by the end of Lot's story in Genesis, he is drunk and in an incestuous, incest relationship with his daughters. That's where this decision eventually leads him. Listen, if winning and getting what it is, all that we want in life, if it's going to lead you there, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Winning, it's not worth it if it's going to cost us our ability to walk with God. If it's going to put our ability to follow him and to obey him and to live a life that pleases him. If it's going to put that at risk, it's just not worth it. If the world becomes too big to us, that will happen. Winning isn't worth it if it's going to cost us our relationships. Okay, winning, it's not worth it, but it's going to cost us our ability to live a righteous life, a life that obeys and pleases God. And finally, winning isn't going to be worth it if it's going to cost us, last one here, if it's going to cost us our reliance. Okay, if it costs us our reliance. Verse 14 says, the Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, Lot leaves, he takes the best land. Abram's just sitting there. What do I do now? He's going to go the other direction. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, look around. Look around from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Okay, so Abram, he gives this choice to Lot, and when Lot chose the better land, okay, the well-watered land, Lot, in his mind, he was positioning himself to really where he thought he wouldn't have any needs. Okay, positioning himself to where he says, hey, I'm going to be able to take care of myself. I'm going to be able to take care of everything that I had. Lot, he positioned himself to live a self-reliant life. A life to where he could rely on him. He was secure. Everything was safe. And he was the only person that he had to depend on. But when Abraham gave that choice to Lot, he positioned himself to where he had no other option in life to trust that God was going to come through in what he said that he was going to do. I mean, this was a huge step of faith. And God's sitting up there in heaven, and he sees Abram take this step of faith, and he says, that pleases me. And he comes in and he reminds Abraham, he reaffirms the promise that he gave to him. He even kind of fleshes it out a little bit more. And he just wants Abraham to know, hey, Abraham, you can trust me. What you just did there, that step of faith, this reliance on me, I'm going to continue to come through to you, for you. You can trust me. And so if we want to win, if we want security at the cost of everything else, it's going to cost us that ability to live a life that relies on God. And God tells Abraham, you can trust me. And then he calls Abraham to trust him again. Last verse right here, verse 17. It says, he tells Abraham, he says, go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. And so Abraham, he's there. He reaffirms his promise to him. And what does he tell him to do? He says, hey, all of this land that I've just given you, that I've promised to you, go walk around on it. Go take a stroll on it. Well, why did he do that? Well, in the ancient Near East, what they would do whenever armies would conquer a land, okay, and as they were victorious in battle and they won all this land, what they would do to kind of lay claim to the land that they had just won, they'd go walk around on it. They say, hey, this is mine now. In essence, that's what God is telling Abraham to do. Listen, this step of faith that you just took, I want to give you this. This step of faith to where you said, hey, I want to live a life that relies on you. Continue to do that. Put feet to your faith and go lay a claim to the promises that I've given to you. He says, continue to put yourself in situations where you have no other choice but to trust me. But to trust me, and I'm going to come through for you. You know, I've been a Christian for 25 years. And what I mean by that is 25 years ago, I made the decision to put my trust in what Jesus did on the cross, that his death and his resurrection paid the penalty for my sins. Okay, and because of that, I now have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And for the past 25 years, I've been kind of living in that relationship with God. And, over those past 25 years, there's been some exciting moments and there's been some dull moments, okay, over the last 25 years. And there's a time for both of those in our life. As I reflect over the past 25 years of me walking with Jesus and being a Christian, one thing that I've noticed is those exciting moments. Okay, those times and those moments to where my relationship with Jesus, to where it's really come alive. And it's been exciting, and it's given me joy, and it's given me energy. Those moments, they have typically come to where I have put myself in situations to where I have no other option, no other choice but for God to come through for me. If he didn't, I was going to fail. To put myself in situations where I was forced to trust him, that he was going to do what it was that he said he was going to do. I remember the first time that I gave money that I couldn't afford to give. I was in college, okay, and they had started talking about, hey, if you give, that where your money goes is a sign of your heart. And so I remember the first time I gave money that I couldn't afford to give. And I didn't know how I was gonna pay for my phone bill. And over the next, weeks, I got to see God, I didn't become rich, but I got to see God provide for me and take care of me in some very real ways. And he became real to me and exciting to me because I took a step to trust him. I remember the first time that I shared my faith with a friend of mine, and I kind of put that relationship at risk. And my heart was beating a million miles an hour, and we're having this conversation. But I remember just sitting there and talking with him, and it was exciting. It was nerve-wracking, but it was exciting. And I got to see God work in my life, and I got to see this friend of mine put his trust in Jesus. And I got to see God work when I put myself in a situation where I had to depend on him. Over the past, year, as just being a part of a team planting this church, there's a lot of words I would use to describe this past year. Boring is not one of them. Okay? When we put ourselves in situations where God has to come through based on what he said that he would do, our faith comes alive. Listen, if we never do that, you can come to church here every single Sunday. Okay? You can never miss. You can read this book until the pages fall off. Okay, I don't care how much worship music you listen to in your song, in your car, or you sing. If you never put yourself in situations to where you have to depend on God to come through for you in some very specific ways, where he promised that he has, your life with Jesus, it's going to be dull. It's going to be boring. But listen, if you will put feet to your faith, and you will trust him, and you will put yourself in specific situations where he has to come through in ways that he says that he promised that he would. I promise you, your relationship with Jesus is going to come alive in ways that you never thought was possible. If it's going to cost us our relationships, if it's going to cost us our ability to live a righteous life, to follow and obey God, or if it's going to cost us opportunities to where we can rely on God, winning in whatever those situations is, it's probably not worth it. And so the question I have for you this morning is, where do you need to lose? It's not a question we think about a lot. But in your life right now, where do you need to lose? Maybe there's a relationship where I just need to be the ice tray filler. Okay, a relationship to where for the sake of it, you just need to say, hey, I want to show grace in this moment. Maybe there's some areas in your life to where the world is just getting too big to you. And you can kind of feel its pull on your life getting greater and greater before you get to the point where you can't see the dangers that are around you that'll keep you from living a life that follows God. Maybe you need to evaluate that and put some protections in place there. Maybe you just need to rely on God. You need to take a very specific step in a very specific situation to depend on him, where you're going to need him to come through for you based on what he said that he would do. Winning isn't, if it's going to cost us those things, we'd be better off losing. Winning isn't always worth it. Okay, last story and we'll be done. How many of you seen the Greatest Showman? That the show, okay, where Hugh Jackman can't sing, but he keeps getting in musicals. I don't understand it. But part of the story of the Greatest Showman is the story of Jenny Lind. You guys remember Jenny Lind in that movie or heard her story at all? Jenny Lind, she was at the time when she lived, actually by the time that she was 17 years old, Jenny Lind, she was the most popular and famous singer in the world. In fact, her voice was so beautiful, they called her the Swedish soprano. Okay, and she was so beautiful, the Queen of England would actually come to hear her sing rather than make Jenny come to her. She wouldn't do that for anyone. By the time Jenny was 17, she was the most popular, the most famous singer in the world. And she had all of the wealth and all of the fame and all of those things that came with that. And she had all of it. She was so young. She had that life just kind of laid out for her for years and years to come. Which surprised everyone. When Jenny Lind, before she even turned 30, she retired. She walked away from the stage. And she walked away from that life. And nobody could wrap their mind around, why would she do that? Well, a couple years after that, Jenny was at her home with her husband, and a friend of Jenny's came. And they lived in Europe and came just to stay with them. And she noticed one day that Jenny kind of, like she did every morning, she would get up and she would take her Bible and she would walk out to the beach that was near their home. And her friend went with her one day and she kind of followed Jenny out to the beach. And she sat down there as Jenny was reading her Bible, and she asked her the question that the whole world wanted to know. Why'd you quit? Why'd you quit? Why did you give this up? How could you cut your career? You're so talented. There's so much in store for you. Why did you cut your career so short when all of these opportunities were there? Well, Jenny, she sat there in silence. And then she looked up at the sun in front of her. She looked at the Bible sitting in her lap. Then she turned to her friend and she said, when every single day makes me think less of this, pointing to the sun, and less of this, what else could I do? What else could I do? You see, Jenny, she came to realize at a very young age that winning, it isn't always worth it. And there she sat, content, at peace, living under and in the blessing of God, not because she won, but because she knew when and where to lose. Pray that we could do the same thing. Let's pray. Father, I thank you just for the story of Abraham and just his faith and the example of his faith that we got to see in this story. And God, I just come and I acknowledge to you, God, there's just something in my heart that I just want to win. I just want to win. I want to get ahead. I hate the idea of losing. And so, God, I just confess that to you this morning. And Lord, I just pray for all of us here this morning that in those moments of conflict, those moments in conflict with people, those moments where we're wrestling with the decisions on, hey, what are we going to do to get ahead in this life? I pray that we would truly step back and we would wonder, hey, in this moment, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And God, and I pray that what we value, it would come to the surface. God, I pray that we would value people over our pride. I pray that we would value walking with you and living a life that pleases you and close to you over all the other things that this world could offer us. And God, when we feel just this temptation just to grab everything and to fight for security over everything else, God, I pray, Lord, that we would choose to live lives of faith, lives that rely on you. God, give us wisdom this morning to know what those situations are in our life. God, and I pray that you would increase our faith and grow our trust in you, and just that we would be willing to take those steps. And I pray that would reflect to the world. God, ultimately, you made this promise to Abraham so he could be a blessing to the whole world. And God, I pray that as we live lives of faith here in North Fort Worth, I pray that it would reflect the reality that Jesus is real. and that would be shown to the people around us. And we ask all of this in his name. Amen.